Welcome to this information workshop on environmental intelligence, the transition topic of the European Innovation Council. It's my pleasure to welcome you. My name is Annemarie Sassen. I'm the head of unit of the Program Manager's Office. And together with all the program managers, we are organizing a series of info days on all the challenges of the work program of the EIC. Can we go to the next slide? Yes. And during this session dedicated to environmental intelligence, I'm here with Francesco Matteucci, the program manager on this topic. He will explain everything about this topic to you. But I will start with a brief overview of the funding instruments of the European Innovation Council. And then Francesco will continue. He will explain you why we have this transition call, why specifically we have chosen environmental intelligence as a topic. He will also say more what the exact scope of the call is, how your proposal will be evaluated, and also some lessons learned from past evaluations. So transition is a very particular instrument, so it's very important that you understand all the requirements to be able to apply to this goal. He will end with an outlook on if your proposal is selected, then Francesco will do some proactive portfolio management with all the selected projects, and he will explain you what this will be exactly. Francesco, can we go to the next slide? Yes, so this meeting is recorded. We will make the recording and the slides available at this same event page after the event took place, of course. And we welcome you to ask questions. So today is your moment to ask questions to the program managers related to this topic. So please do that in Slido. You have to join at slide.do and then put the event code challenges. And with that, you can type your question. And after Francesco's presentations, we will go over all the questions in the Slido and answer them. So I will start with an explanation of the European Innovation Council, how it fits in the overall Horizon Europe structure. So on this slide, you see Horizon Europe. It's a 100 billion euro research and development program over 7 years. It has the main body of Horizon Europe is structured into 3 different pillars. Pillar 1 is excellent science, and there we find, for instance, the European Research Council. So it's fundamental research. In Pillar 2, we have the applied research dedicated to global challenges and European industrial competitiveness. And then in Pillar 3, it's called Innovative Europe. There we find the European Innovation Council. Also, for instance, the European Institute of Innovation and Technologies, the EIT, is also part of Pillar 3. And if you go to the next slide, so the EIC is unique in the sense that it will bring fundamental research or research which is still at very low technology readiness level. It wants to bring that as soon as possible to the market. And in order to do that, it has 3 different instruments. The first one is Pathfinder. Pathfinder is dedicated to early stage research. However, that has a potential for breakthrough technologies, even though it can still be high risk because these technologies have not been proven yet that they can really be as effective as their promise is. And in the Pathfinder, this is usually for consortia. You can receive a grant up to 3 to 4 million euro. From in the Pathfinder with your grant, the idea is that you bring your technology from TRL level 1 or 2 more or less to the level 4, and that at the end you have a proof of concept. Yeah, that the idea that it still has potential and it's potentially still a breakthrough technology. Then the second instrument is transition. And today the topic is a transition topic. And here the result of the early research, it's promising, but it still needs a bit more maturation to bring it to the market. And if that's the case for your research, then transition is the instrument. Usually the projects there start at TRL level 4, and at the end of the project they should reach TRL level 6. So it is that you mature the technology, which was a proof of concept, and now you really validate it in the market, and you get business and market readiness. And here you also receive a grant up to 2.5 million euro. And then our third instrument, our largest instrument, it's the accelerator, and that is for individual SMEs. And here the objective is that the product or the service that you've developed to bring it to the market and to scale it up. So it's to scale up deep tech or disruptive innovations by startups and SMEs. And here the financial instrument is blended finance, and that means you can get a grant up to 2.5 million euro or equity investment up to 15 million euro, or in some cases even above. So the financial ticket that you would receive in accelerator is much larger, and that is because you want to, for instance, access new markets in other countries, and you want to do activities that scale up your idea. So if you go to the next slide, it again shows these three instruments: Pathfinder, Transition, and Accelerator. And I already explained that with each of these instruments, the technology readiness level is going up, but at the same time, also the commercial readiness level goes up. So the business readiness level. That's much higher in the case of an accelerator than in the case of a Pathfinder project. And this really shows how we go from research, where the focus is on what is the technology that I can develop, what is feasible, to the why, where you wonder, why would people buy my product? What is my unique selling point? And then you are in the more on the commercial side of the business. And the EIC wants to accompany all the beneficiaries during their entrepreneurial journey from the what to this why. Can we go to the next one? So we provide financial support, but we also provide other support services, which is the proactive management. And that is also unique to the European Innovation Council. You don't find that in the rest of Horizon Europe. And one source of proactive management are the business acceleration services, which are available to all the beneficiaries of the EIC. And there they give the projects access to entrepreneurs, for instance, or to investors, but also to mentors, to people who can really help on an individual basis to guide the project. For instance, some of the activities that's being done in the context of the business acceleration services are corporate days, where a corporate can meet some of the EIC beneficiaries that develop applications and services which are useful for this corporate. And then we would organize a matchmaking day where you could pitch your inventions to these corporates, and the corporates can then take up bilateral contacts with you further to see if some kind of deal would be possible together. So that's the business acceleration services. But then we also have the program managers. So the program managers, you meet today Francesco as the program manager for green tech materials. They are very experienced people who personally have lived this journey from deep tech research to bringing innovations to the market. And they are hired by the European Commission for 4 years. So they are temporarily working with us, and they are then supporting projects in the portfolios in the area of expertise of the program manager. They're supporting these projects in order to go to the market with the good research that you have developed. And they do two things. One thing is that they develop vision around certain challenges that should be solved, and for which there's potential for Europe to develop new innovative companies. And these are then translated as challenges in the work program. And the second thing that they do is, once the projects are selected that have responded to these challenges, then they do proactive portfolio management, and they work together with this set of projects to help them bring the impact that is expected of these projects. We go to the next slide. Then you see here the work program of 2023 of the European Innovation Council. So the total amount of budget available is 1.6 billion euro. You will see on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, you can see that we have the three instruments. So we have Pathfinder, we have Transition, and we have Accelerator. And each of these instruments has an open part and a challenge part. And the open part is meant for you to submit your ideas. It's bottom up. You can submit any topic as long as it's related to health, green transition, or digital transition. And you can submit proposals in these areas. And then the part related to the challenges, that is then top-down designed by the program managers around the visions that they have. So on this slide, you see on the right-hand side, you will see all the challenges that we have, going from Pathfinder and then to Transition and then to Accelerator. So for Transition, we have three challenges. One is medical, micro, nano, bio devices. For that, the info day will be tomorrow. We have environmental intelligence, which is now the info day, and we have chip scale optical frequency combs, for which the info day is, I think, in 2 weeks. So now the next slide, and that's the last one related to the introduction. So with the EIC, we also want to be very flexible in the deadlines for submissions of calls. So you will see that here you can see all the cutoff dates of the various calls that we have. In this case, we are in transition. You can submit your proposal at any time. And then we will have two cutoff dates, which will be the 12th of April and the 27th of September. And after those dates, we will evaluate all the proposals that came in until that time. Since this is the transition, that are the relevant cutoff dates for you now. And you can also see on this slide the other cutoff dates. So with this, I want to hand over to Francesco, and he will tell you more about the environmental intelligence challenge.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for the introduction. We now, if the slide goes where it has to go, we go to the transition challenge, environmental intelligence. So we start this presentation, colleagues, will be a little bit a merge of what why we selected the challenge on environmental intelligence, why we selected this topic, but also why you should apply. So we start, as Anne-Marie already said, the transition is has got some peculiarities. Okay, the first one is that we want, through the transition, the projects mainly to do two things. The first one is we want to support novel technologies, and we want them to start from the proof of principle. So we want, that's one of the requirements of the proposal that I will discuss also later on. It is important that the device, or if it is a material you want to scale up, or if it is another kind of technology, the final stuff, so the final, let me say, future product that you want to develop has to start from the proof of principle tested in the lab. So it means you have to start from a TRL 3 to 4, not below this one. It means that if we have got one material, but the final product is the technology, is the device that has got this material. And if we only have the material at the TRL 3 or 4, but the device not is still to be ever tested, this is not ready for the transition. We want the transition to apply once your full system that you want to further developed, reached the proof of principle, already reached the proof of principle or proof of concept scale. And then the idea through the transition is to scale it up from the proof of principle up to the prototype phase. So from the technology point of view, I will say it again, but this is the most relevant thing, from proof of principle or proof of concept up to prototype. But the other way around, what we want to do is also the commercialization development. So at the end of the project, what we want to be reached is the identification of the exploitation plan. The business model has to be identified. Do you want to license the know-how you develop in the transition? Do you want to set up a startup? Are you already an SME and you want to scale it up? Okay, that's good. This is what we want you to be at the end of the project, the business model. And so during the project, you will receive, as Anne-Marie said before, different kind of help to set up your, let me say, exploitation plan. And then obviously there are two types of transition. The one is open, and today there are predefined thematic priorities that is the challenge. Who can apply? The eligibility criteria. Transition is the only call that has got, let me say, eligibility criteria concerning who can apply, because the Pathfinder are open to everybody, and the accelerator is only for small, medium enterprises. But the transition you can apply only if your project, as you can see here on the lower part, if it started 12 months before or ended less than 20 months after the call deadline, and if the topic, the research result, the proof of principle that you want to develop has been funded by a previous Pathfinder or Horizon 2020 FET, that is Future Emerging Technologies, or that the novelty a project coming out of the Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe, if obviously on topic. Then there is the FET IRANETS, the EU Defense Fund, and the ERC proof of concept. The prerequisite eligibility criteria of the timing is valid for all of them, and the peculiarity of the transition challenge is that we opened it to H2020 or Horizon Europe funded projects on topic. The financial contribution is in between 0.5 and 2.5 million. The budget you can see here, the budget for the open, it's 67.86 million. And the challenges, each one has got approximately 20 million euros. The application, there are two cutoffs, 12th of April and 27th of September. There are 4 categories of consortia. The first one is the mono beneficiary, and here you can see the other ones. If there are 2 beneficiaries, if there are 3 beneficiaries, if there are 4 or 5. And here you can see the countries where you can come from and the beneficiary countries and consortia that you can easily understand that it has to be as a beneficiary in an independent legal entity, it has to come from a member state or an associated country, and the consortia can include more or less all the kind of actors of the European ecosystem of innovation or associated countries. And then we go, but am I right if I say that I want to apply the transition if I was the invention, the proof of principle I want to bring it to the prototype was not part of an eligible project? Yes, you can have it. there is now the tool, and you find all this information in the EIC website. And please have a look at the EIC Info Day, where the transition eligibility and all the stuff that now I will summarize, you will find in details. If you today, later on, my colleague, the project officer of the transition unit, Linda Curzola, will help me in answering your questions, that please provide your questions via Slido. And the idea is like this. What we want to scale from TRL 3.4 up to TRL 5.6 is the system that has been, as I said before, developed during another project. So it is not necessary that you were one of the ones that did that job, because it is sufficient also if you got a commitment letter that confirms the fact that the owner of the research result is available to provide it to you in a way that it can be fair, reasonable, and not discriminatory concerning the access to the results and the fact that you can use it. As I said before, the starting and ending point, we can see this on two ways, the technology and the business track. We want this technology to be increased, so to be brought starting from the validation in the lab up to the prototype, but we want contemporary the business track to arrive at the end point where the functional version is ready and the commercialization strategy has been set up, as well as the exploitation strategy. So the first questions that you have to do are the one that I said. Am I eligible? No. Am I able to get the commitment of an idea that I want to scale up? Yes. So also if I was not eligible, thanks to this opportunity of the letter of commitment, you can do it. So there is the opportunity to find partners. There is ongoing this kind of possibility, because you can look for other researchers that has got ideas. So SMEs, entrepreneurs that would like to connect, there is a way. There is a way, and here you can find some indications. So if there is something that fits in another project on your strategic needs, you can look on the list of eligible projects on the EIC transition, and you can look this through two tools, the Innovation Radar as well as the ERC Research Information System. And the collaboration, once you use these two tools, you can see here once again them, you can contact the owner of the results and try to understand if and how you want to work with him, if he wants to allow you to use his results, if it is needed together to write your proposal. And so if you have something that you think could be, let me say, valued, and you don't want to keep on doing this, there is opportunity that someone else could ask you. So the three, let me say, bullet points is there is the opportunity to get informed, to get involved, and to get interconnected. Because the idea, as Anne-Marie said before, of the EIC is really to nurture the scientific ideas up to its exploitation from the early stage through the Pathfinder, through defining the technology track and the business track via the transition, and then scale it up via the accelerator. That's the novelty, one of the two novelties. The second novelty is that the EIC is not what normally is called a grant giving agency. We don't only do project management of the projects and monitoring. We work, what is said, we are a hands-on agency. We work with the projects to implement their innovation journey, also providing services and help outside, coming from outside through the business acceleration services, and coming from the inside via the program manager offices. And so we go now to the most interesting part of the presentation, that is, why did we choose the environmental intelligence? As Anne-Marie said, one of the responsibility of the program managers is to put in place its vision, to make it happen, is vision. In the case of the transition, due to these eligibility criteria, we also had to consider what already has been funded. So we did this kind of job, identifying the transition, the needs, via two parallel, with a lot of interconnections, railways. One railway is we spoke with the expert. They can come from different kind of science. They can come from different kind of business. It can be financial, it can be companies, innovation managers, entrepreneurs. And the other track is that we studied not only papers, reports, attending conferences and events, but also we looked at the database of the ongoing or recently funded projects inside Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe to look where we reach the reasonable mass to put in place one transition challenge. And the reasonable mass is around the, let me say, innovative topic of environmental intelligence. I say innovative because it's not since many years that we consider environmental intelligence in its application. What do we mean for environmental intelligence? We mean all the kind of technologies that can provide us data, so intelligence, and this kind of data are allowed it to give us information concerning the environmental status of the different ecosystems. So the idea is to connect how I get the data, how I elaborate the data, and the following action that thanks to the data I collected and elaborated, I can put in place an environmental action. This action can be a remediation in case of pollution. It can be another kind of policy help that we give to the governors, to the policymakers. So for example, we detect that there is a certain kind of pollution in an area, on air, on soil, on hydrosphere, and we want to be able to support the policymaker to avoid the repetition of this kind of pollution. So we use once again sensors and data intelligence to make it happen. And this obviously goes in the direction environmental intelligence to help solving all the kind of human-based pollutions that are actually compromising the health of ecosystems and obviously posing risks for all the, let me say, ecosystem and health linked to the different soil, hydrosphere, water, or air. And obviously, we want to bring these kind of technologies as much as possible close to the market. There is not a very strong, let me say, economy around this one. So we need to increase the knowledge of environmental modeling, so to get the reasonable data also to model what's going on in the environment. And obviously we need to set up actions to remediate the pollution that we did. And last but not least, this kind of interrelated sources will help us also in better understanding the natural ecosystems and in preventing from the repetition of this kind of big pollution. And so on the combination of these two things, the remediation action and the policy driven by data, we go to some examples of environmental intelligence. Some of these examples has been taken by ongoing FET or Pathfinder projects that were funded through a FET proactive call that happened some years ago, whose title was Environmental Intelligence. So if we, as I said before, we are looking for technologies that want to monitor, to get data via different type of sensors in different kind of environments. Just as an example here, top on left, on air, just an example can be, we are prone to receive proposals with breakthrough innovations starting from lab-tested technologies, looking, for example, at how we can develop the electronic nose. The other way around, we want to see, for example, inside the hydrosphere, we see an example on the sea, how to get data, in this case, of radioactive sources, and to monitor the health of the oceans, for example, via combining ROV, remote operating vehicles underwater, managed or eventually self-powering themselves or connecting other kind of sources data coming out from satellites. Last but not least, if we look inside the soil, we can see different kind of environmental intelligence examples. On one side, we can see insects. And here there is all the big area with a lot of, let me say, the idea of the type of insect that we can try to properly, let me say, train them or genetically modify them in order that they can focus their senses around certain type of plants with certain type of pests or other kinds of diseases. so that they can connect us to the knowledge of this kind. The other way around, we can get data concerning the health of the plants via monitoring this one in order to understand if some pests exactly are going on. The other way around, we can monitor with different kind of Internet of Things devices the soil health, or we can imagine to use, for example, drones to biomonitor certain area, and where we find pollution, we can, let me say, throw different types of sensors on the soil. But the combination of the three things, that is, I detect, I get data via sensors, I elaborate the data, and I make actions out of the elaboration of the data. These are the three stepping stones of the environmental intelligence technologies, where we really consider that there are options to make these things happen and to make these things, let me say, go to the market and help also, for example, on the big issue of the ongoing loss of biodiversity, because the pollution, unfortunately strongly linked also by the increasing of extreme events, is continuously poisoning and continuously creating more risk inside the daily health. And where are the innovation gaps? On one side, we see that there are remediation technologies to remediate contaminated areas, but these existing technologies, normally they are complex. They can be energy consuming or expensive. They can always, not always, but most frequently be, let me say, not 100% also safe. So what we need is the combination of the technologies that I said before via different kind of sources of data. They can be technologies that via sensors can get this kind of working and getting data via biological, chemical, or physical sensors. But once again, what we need them is to have this kind of combination of the sensor, the elaboration of the data, and the remediation technology in an easy way. We need to have sustainable, easy to implement, repeatable, scalable remediation actions. Because what we see is that there is the need also to set up this kind of, let me say, remediation-based technologies. It can be bio-based remediation, nature-based remediation, but driven by the knowledge coming out of the data that we can get out of the different ecosystems where our technologies are implemented. So if we go now to the scope and the specific objectives of the call, we see that we try to be very broad. In fact, we said that the proposal should focus not only on materials, but on materials, processes, and systems, including all the kind of systems. And as I said before, we want this kind of technologies status of the different ecosystems in order to prevent, reduce, or eliminate the different kind of recalcitrant or emerging contaminants or pollutants. And they can be present in air, in soil, or in the hydrosphere. That's the sentence where you have to understand if your technology is included. That's a challenge. And obviously, this challenge has got some boundary conditions. We want these sensors to avoid the use of critical raw materials or ensure their circularity, so that we can imagine to have the onset of the synergies between, on one side, the sensors that get the data and the elaboration of the data, also thanks to the artificial intelligence. So we want also to provide potential, let me say, scalable data science activities, so that we will be able, thanks to these systems of environmental intelligence, to improve the environmental monitoring and eventually the remediation actions. So we want technologies that can combine and analyze data, but these data can come obviously from different sources. They can be in situ data via different kind of sensors, or they can be remote data via satellite. And these technologies can be aimed at doing and implementing remediation actions that could eventually also be included in the proposal. More than appreciated, this is not compulsory. But for sure, they can also, the environmental intelligence setup could also, let me say, only help the decision ready information-based policies. So policies that are, let me say, enabled, are implemented thanks to the information, to the data coming out of this environmental intelligence. Obviously, the technologies should be, as I said before, sustainable with a very low carbon footprint and should consider their full cycle analysis. And once again, we want obviously everything to be safe for the safety and the health of the ecosystems of the human beings. Which are the expected impacts? On one side, to reduce the environmental pollutions due to this, let me say, continuously increasing evidence of this kind of pollution. We want this to be solved. We want also to increase the awareness of the policymakers and of the citizens around the big interaction, the need to change the interaction between humanity and natural systems. We want the environmental policy to be enabled in this case being to be aware of the real value coming out of the monitoring process via this environmental intelligence. And last but not least, the most ambitious part of this challenge is to enable the starting point of a European economy, a niche part of the market that can be environmental monitoring and remediation based. There is a strong need. We see that a lot of polluted areas are not having the tools to remediate to the pollution. And we need to set up these kind of technologies via this transition call. We don't do this, or we didn't do this alone. As I said before, the transition challenge identification for my colleagues and me has always the need to study what has been funded. And here we see that obviously this policy is in full alignment with the European policies and initiatives, such as the broad Green Deal, but going also to the European biodiversity policy. And then you can see here some examples of the calls that we consider have developed results that could be eligible for this transition call. And obviously the underpinning evidence behind this challenge of the environmental intelligence is written in many, many documents. Here you see only some examples of these policies. And now we go for the last part before going to the slide of answers. Thanks to the collaboration with my colleague Linda Curzola, we will see a little bit at what and how you will be able to apply for the two deadlines of this transition challenge call, that is the 12th of April and the 27th of September. The first thing that it's up to you is to check the eligibility, or let me say to get the eligibility via this commitment that we quoted before. Then once you do this, you can apply via the EU funding and tender portal. And then it starts the evaluation process. There is the remote evaluation, as you can see here. And then if you overcome the remote evaluation, that will take approximately 9 weeks of call after the call deadline, so very short, there is a second step that is an interview with evaluators. And in the case, if the challenge, if the proposal, in case of the open, but we are speaking about the challenge, there will be me or one of my colleagues, and there are 3 program managers, Marco Antonio Pantaleo, Carina Faber, and me working in the side of green technologies, but also other colleagues dealing with agriculture or agri-food tech, other working on the building, other on the electronics. So if there is a relevant program manager dealing with your proposal, you will be part of as an active observer of the interview. And this will happen 13 weeks after the call deadline. And then if you are successful in the second step, you will go through the GAP, that is the grant agreement preparation, and you will sign your agreement within 7 months of the call deadline. So the first step, have a look at the call, go on the EIC website to look at the EIC Info Day, where there are more relevant information on the transition. Look at the call very carefully. If everything is properly within your ideas linked to the challenge, then start this 6-step process, and good luck for it. And so we say a little bit about what we do as program manager if your project will be selected. Depending upon the type of funding scheme, if Pathfinder, Transition Accelerator, the program manager work in a different way and make their proactive management in a different way, but mostly the kind of help that you can get via the in-house expert of the EIC, it's that if and when we work together and continuously we work together with the project officer that is a reference person for the project management of your project, the other side, the program manager works with the PO and you in order to help you in eventually look on how to match make your EIC project with other kind of let me say, on one side financial sources, but on the other side also scientific and business infrastructures or business events where you can go to learn more, and so to accelerate the development of your technology, to learn more from the customers, to make the stakeholders mapping. This is the kind of help we can provide you in order to better help you in developing your business plan, to understand which are the strategic partnership that you can eventually implement. And obviously the collaboration also with other projects ongoing, and eventually, and this is already happening in different transitions, the discussion with the regulatory issues that are somehow blocking the innovation, your innovation development. We are entitled to discuss with the policymakers inside European Commission, exactly trying to help overcoming the policy standards or regulatory bottlenecks. So the last 5 minutes, I will show you some experience and lesson learned after this 2 years of transition challenge. The first one is that you need to focus more on the business potential of your proposal. Once again, the business aspect together with the technology aspect has to be in interconnected ongoing tracks. But it's important that you remember that you need to start with a preliminary idea of the market, of the application, of the business, and a preliminary, let me say, business model validation, and what is called also the technology market matching. So my technology matches properly with these different kind of markets. I will focus more on this one. And the third important aspect that I already said, please consider that the eligibility criteria is the level 3, the TRL 3, the starting point. Okay? And so if we see that you can start from TRL 3, 4, but if you are the 5, it is too high, and you have to direct your attention to the accelerator funding scheme. So some feedback from the jury members. They want to see that there are technical milestones. There is an intellectual property strategic management strategy. There is the proper budget and allocation of resources. You clearly identify the technical and the business risks. So here it is important, for example, in terms if one of the partners or the partner is one research and technological organization or one public research center or one academy, it's important to see the involvement, if properly not present in the research team, the proper involvement of the KTO or TTO, the knowledge transfer office or the technology transfer office, because in parallel with the technology track, once again, I repeat, there is also the business track. And obviously in terms of implementation, because the 3 parameters to be evaluated is always excellence, impact, and implementation, it's also the proper interdependence of work packages, the credibility of the business and business objectives, and a reasonable team that is able to exploit the research result. It doesn't mean that at the beginning you already have all the team, but it means that you know who is missing, or you are available to properly and starting immediately to understand who you are missing to set up the proper team that can exploit your research result. And so the first 3 things that we see here on the right side is we want you to better know the markets where you want to plan to enter. You have to know the state of the art of the competitors. You have to know the problem you are solving. It does not exist yet a scientific clear identification of what deep tech means. So in EIC, we invest in non-incremental breakthrough innovations that are related to deep tech. What do we mean for deep tech? The first thing is that we want your technology to solve a problem. And so you need to know very well the problem. It is so more a pull approach more than a push approach. So it means that you know the problem and you are pulled by this problem to solve it. And this deep tech, once again, it's via a science-based multidisciplinary approach, high risk approach. Normally, that's another characteristic. And last but not least, you want to implement it in an ecosystemic approach. So inside the traditional open approach. Here we see other things that are the major weaknesses. The most important one is the first one, as I said, the lack of understanding of the market and of the competitors in the market, how they are developing their business model, why they are developing, why someone is bankrupting, why someone has gone to the market. These are all the requirements that are strongly linked to the innovation, because we are EIC, European Innovation Council. And the major strengths are the quality of the innovation, the disruptiveness of the innovation, and the team. Normally, the venture capitalists, the private investors said, the earlier stage is the technology in terms of development. The most relevant thing is the quality of the team. And here we see that exactly this is one of the strengths of the Go proposals, the competent team and the quality of the innovation. And here, before concluding, we see some transition overall results. In terms of numbers, we see that more or less the cutoff is much higher than Pathfinder and Accelerator inside transition. We are in between the double digit, in between 10 and 20%. But once again, clearly understand if your technology, as we said here, has got a great innovation, let me add, is at a reasonable overall, at least TRL3, and you have the competent team to consider that we want you to work on two tracks, the business and the technology track. I hope I gave enough information. What I didn't say, and let me say the Bible have not been the words that I gave, but the Bible for your application is the EIC 2023 Work Program. And please have a look at the recording general info day. You can find all the details here. We will provide on our internet site this recorded and the slides. Please consider that there is your national contact point that can give you all the information that can help you in setting up the right partnership to understand if the innovation is reasonably ready or if the transition is the best way you can look for money. Because we don't have to forget, as Anne-Marie said at the beginning, that there are inside Horizon Europe many options to get funded in different topics. Environmental intelligence is one of these topics. And this is only for the proposal that have got an innovation and for a team that wants to set up this innovation developing, starting from a TRL3. So if you are not a TRL3, it doesn't mean that you don't have to apply, but look for other calls. If you're having a higher TRL, once again, look at other calls. There are many calls because the environmental and climate issues linked to mitigation or different kind of adaptation is really and strongly supported within Horizon Europe. I thank and I ask my colleagues to provide the slide of questions, and I invite my colleague Linda Curzola to join me for the answer to the question. Here we are, Linda. The first one will be there a good overview of the eligible project program for transition. Them are MCSA and ERC, not only POC, JTI, BBI, etc. eligible. The answer for the first question, Linda, is
yes, it's in the work program. So basically you can refer to the work program for all the eligibility conditions. You will see that there are some changes compared to last year. Last year, for example, it was a kind of uniform approach for transition open and transition challenges, but this year is slightly different. You should not really encounter so many problems. If I recall correctly, it's going to be actually open for challenges only. So the only thing is that you really need to check out that you make really clearly the reference to the linked project. and you can really make us understand that he is building on a project that is being funded already either in Horizon Europe or in H2020. This is only for the challenges, but this is a slight let's say slight change, but for all the eligible projects and even programs, you have in the work program 2 footnotes that I would suggest or recommend you to read.
Yeah, and on this case, Linda, sorry if I interrupt you, there is also the timing eligibility. That means the 12 months after or the 24 months and before the proposal. These are the 2 requirements. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, Francesco, for reminding this detail that is quite important as well.
Yeah. For the second one, will the owner of the results be notified when a transition proposal based on the result is submitted? Let me say that when you submit, Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, you are requested to indicate the origin of your, let me say, how you want to move forward via the transition. And if it is part of the project, you have to write that which is the project, or if you were not one partner, you have to clearly identify and write and show the letter of commitment by, let me say, the owner of the technology you are submitting. So it cannot happen that you are eligible, someone applies with your idea, because the applicant will have to show which was the project, or if he was not part of the project, he has to show the commitment letter of the owner of the results. Am I right, Linda?
Yes, totally correct. So indeed, this is one of the peculiarities that we have in transition. So indeed, you build on a previous project, but the consortium configuration can vary, meaning that it's not going to be necessarily the original consortium that you had before in the HE or H2020 project that was funded. And therefore, this is why it's very important that you really have, let's say, a confirmation that the applicants are the intellectually property rights owner or holder. And you have the necessary agreement that you describe really in the specific part of the proposal before submitting it. Applicants that are not the owner of the result, they have, well, to be further developed, they really need indeed this confirmation letter, which is a commitment letter from the relevant owner. So the relevant owner, if it's not part of the consortium, technically speaking, is not notified by us or will not be notified by the EIC when the proposal is submitted, but should know already because you asked prior, let's say, consent in this way.
The letter of, so how it is written here,
Yes.
The third question, why, if you are not part, how can you show the former consortium? We want you to show via letter of
yes.
Am I right, Linda? I also think that I heard in the info day that there are already something like a template of letter of commitment eventually that are available.
Yes, indeed, because technically speaking, when you go on the funding portal, you have all the documents. So you can find the work program, you can find the template for the proposal, but also indeed a template of this letter that can be attached as an attachment, actually, not really part of the proposal, part B at the very end. So it's already, you just need to select which case scenario is applicable to your specific situation, depending on the configuration of the consortium.
Looking at which is the best way to demonstrate the TRL of your proposal, you have to write it. I mean, your weapon is the 20 pages template where you write, and you have to show that you reached the technology readiness. You started, sorry, at least from the TRL3. So the only way you can do it is via images or text. But that is how we start with the remote evaluation. Then eventually during the interview, you can speak about it and show to the jury members that you start from this kind of TRL.
Indeed.
Is space observation also part of environmental intelligence monitoring? The answer is yes. As I said before, there is a possibility to have in situ and ex situ starting data. So also satellite data or space observation are part of environmental intelligence. How do you measure successful monitoring? How do you measure? I think that you mean the monitoring of the environmental intelligence part. How do you measure? Is the risk assessment a natural disaster assessment? Yes, if the disaster assessment or the risk assessment is done via data that are collected or in situ or ex situ, yes, it is part, it is considered. And if you can rephrase, because I do not understand what you mean, how do you measure successful monitoring? If you mean, how do you measure the fact that you are collecting successful data via your sensors, I think that this is part of the technology to show that the data are reliable. That's part of the technology. If we look at the portfolio program management and influence on the decision is granted or not, what is the possible? Okay, no, in this case, the portfolio approach, what we call in EIC hands-on portfolio approach is, let me say, a binding condition only for the Pathfinder project. In transition and accelerator, program manager, we work with and for the projects with the project officer, but the portfolio approach is not one of the evaluation criteria. The evaluation criteria for the remote and the interview is always excellence, impact, and implementation. In this case, the portfolio or the program, it's part of the challenge selection, but it does not influence. Should I rather apply to the open or the challenge call if my 100% in scope with the challenge? I would say for the open. I mean, you apply for the challenge if your proposal is in scope, because there are many proposals that are not retained by the remote monitoring because they are not in scope. It is necessary to be perfectly in scope with the challenge because we want this challenge to be solved. Otherwise, it's not a problem, but there is a transition open with different eligibility criteria. As Linda said, this is why we implemented this novelty of opening the transition challenge to all the Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe funded projects with certain time requirement, but in particular only and if they are in scope with the challenge. That is why we didn't open this one to all the open transition, but only to the challenge. Who composes the jury of the call? The first part of the remote evaluation, I leave up to Linda to answer because I don't know. I answer the second part that is in the interview. The interview are exactly scientists. It's a mixture emerging of scientists, investors, innovation managers, and entrepreneurs in the interview. For the remote,
yes.
you say, Linda, because I don't know.
Yes, no, you said exactly correctly, Francesco. Indeed, for the second part is exactly like that. Ideally, the candidates should have both backgrounds. That would be really the ideal. Sometimes this is not always possible, so we make sure that indeed in the composition we have a balance in between scientific expertise and indeed business side or investments are also investors is also covered. For more or less is the same, I would say, for the remote, but maybe there a little bit less on the investment, even though the impact criterion is quite important because they will assess in any case the potentiality for the exploitation, the route to exploit your results.
Okay, then I don't know, once again, what does it mean here, monitoring? How does the EIC measure successful monitoring of the project? If it is monitoring of the project, it is the job of the project officer together with the program manager and the experts that are provided to the project to monitor the development of the project. What are the relevant milestones and the political requirements EIC wants a proposal to fulfill?
Maybe I think that for the EIC measures, successful monitoring can be, well, in terms of KPIs, we have different kind of indeed proactive management, like Francesco mentioned before, so with the progress meetings or review meetings. And for us, these meetings can help us to monitor closely and therefore to intervene in order to facilitate projects to be more successful. Maybe this was what it means, because it's not super clear, the formulation. The second part, I would say that the relevant milestones are scientific, but also not only technical, but also business milestones. This is why we always request our projects to make sure that already a specific moment in time of the project, month 6, 12, or 18, or even 30, you have indeed also kept into account the milestones that cover the business plan or business model that you have in mind. For the political requirements is more for, I guess, you, Francesco, when it comes down maybe to proactive management in the portfolio. If maybe you have specific, I don't know, requirements for the.
No. On this case, yes.
Policy, I think.
Exactly.
Political, I think that more than the political is policy. But
political is not my job for sure. In terms of policy, no, also it's not ours. And on the side of the policy, for sure, it has to be aligned with the policy of the European Commission. In this case, the policy relevant to all the under the big umbrella of the Green Deal. As I said before, there is also the European Biodiversity Act and policy, and so all the kind of policies that are linked somehow, let me say, to the sector, this ecosystem where the pollution is. So if the policy are linked to air, water, or soil, for example. So, but the European ones, and as well, obviously, as the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals of United Nations. What if two challenges called potentially fit the technology and proposal? I would say that it's good for you if it happens, and you have to select the one that fits more to your to the challenge. So if it is half and a half, I would say there is not an answer. You have to apply. You have to decide one of the two. Eventually, I mean, I would suggest to choose the one that has got more relevance. Are the program managers the same for the Pathfinder and transition? Sorry. I mean, there is a relevant program manager for each challenge. But while in the case of the Pathfinder, the program manager works on the hands-on portfolio, on the side of the transition, as I said before, we work in a different way on the management of the project during its implementation. The application, yes, it's maximum 20 pages, yes. Okay. I don't know if there are more questions. If there are no more questions, we wait a few seconds. Otherwise, I thank the colleagues Anne-Marie that made the introduction. I thank Linda, Juliana and Linda for the support, Juliana and Jenny for the organization. And I thank you all for attending this event, and we leave the floor to you, and good luck for the submission of the proposal. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.